In this video, we're turning this into this. Stick around to the end of the video to find out how. How's it going on, guys and girls? Welcome back to Aquila Painting. My name is Graham and welcome to the channel. Today we are looking at how to turn takeaway containers into modular terrain for your battlefield. But first, if you're new here, consider subscribing, guys and girls. A lot of you who watch these videos aren't subscribed and missing out on the content I put out bi-weekly. And judging by the likes on each video, a lot of you do like them. So one, thank you very much, and two, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything else. As I said, it really helps the channel to grow and you don't miss out on any of the content. So during lockdown, like many people in the UK and probably across the world, I've had a few takeaways. Just a few. What? Honest. And during one of these takeaways, I looked at the containers that they came in and thought I could make some great scatter terrain from that. And so this video was born. Thankfully, all the food came in the boxes, were wrapped in greaseproof paper as well, protecting the boxes themselves. So any of the boxes that were a little bit greasy or anything like that, I just threw away. But with the clean ones, we managed to get some great looking terrain. Stick around to the end of the video to see what they look like. Looking at the boxes, I thought about something initially like a statue's plinth or the base of a statue, but I thought that would make a really boring video and it wouldn't really challenge me that much. So I rethought the idea, and looking at the walls of the boxes, I decided to make a modular barricade concrete terrain. The first thing to do was to see if the idea in my head would work. Step 1, proof of concept. I liked the grooves in the card. It made it really feel like there were concrete fortified positions. And they really reminded me of the Walls of Martyrs, the Imperial defense line from GW. So that's what I was going to go for, modular concrete barricade. Once I had the idea, I marked out where I would cut out my soon-to-be barricades. While doing this, I decided that some of the walls should have a 45-degree angle on each end. This was so I could have bends and corners in the defense line, and some were just flat wall segments. Out of the boxes, I managed to get 6 wall segments, 6 angled wall segments, 4 single corners, and 4 flat wall sections. Looking at the parts I now had, I decided that the wall segments with the corners attached should be the main parts of the wall. They would support the rest of the modular pieces. Once I had my pieces, I started playing around with them and just seeing how they fit together and would work. And they actually worked far better than I anticipated. I was pleasantly surprised on how well the segments actually fitted together. But there was one thing I realised at this point, is that I could only have the walls bend in one way, so eventually creating a circle. Also, I realised that the wall segments themselves were too tall even for a Primaris Marine at 32mm scale, so they had to be cut down. I didn't do a great job of cutting them down at all. Some of them came out really wonky, but I do have a quick fix for that later on in the video. All in all, I could live with that, but this was the proof of concept I needed that my idea would work. Step 2 was now construction. These walls were needed a couple of extra things before they would start really looking like concrete barricades. One, the main wall segments needed bases to give them a little bit more stability and to give them a little bit more character. And 2, they needed bulking out, so from the back they would actually look like concrete. For the bases, I had some fiberboard I saved from a flat pack wardrobe I didn't use, which was perfect for these walls. Fiberboard in the UK is different to fiberboard in the US. It's not that cardboard stuff you get in the back of notepads. It's like a really rubbish MDF which is super thin and you can snap it, but you can also cut it with an X-Acto knife, and that is exactly why I'm using it now. You don't need major tools like a saw or anything like that, but if you do have them to hand, give them a go. I cut the bases to size of the main wall supports and the small corner segments. These were going to be the main supports for the rest of the walls. One of the wall segments I cut so badly, instead of throwing it out, I decided to make it a crumbled, broken part of the barricade, just to give it a little bit more character. What I did was I cut it in half, cut away from the cardboard until I was happy with the general broken look of it. Between the ruined parts, I just added some cork just to simulate some broken concrete and stone. I'll fill in the gaps between them with some sand and glue later. Now, for this project, I used Gorilla Glue to stick the bases to the walls. This would fill in any of the gaps from my wonky cuts when I adjusted the height of the wall, but I also wanted to try and make some depth and some height with the rubble and the dirt that's built up against the barricade. And the Gorilla Glue expanding, I thought would be a good idea to experiment with that. I quickly figured out that if I splodged on a load of glue and attached the wall pieces in place, it wouldn't work. While the glue was setting, it would expand, shifting the position of the walls. So instead I added a few dots of the Gorilla Glue to the base, fixed the barricade in place, and then poured the Gorilla Glue around once it had dried. This filled in my gaps and my wonky cuts perfectly. At this point I thought it would be a good idea to see if I could skip a step. So when the wall segments were glued in place and I added more Gorilla Glue around the wall segments, I then added sand and small stones. I wanted to see if I could skip the step of adding this later, speeding up the process. And it kind of worked, but I had a problem with the Gorilla Glue over expanding because I used too much. And I found myself constantly having to tap the Gorilla Glue down so it didn't have that bulgy looking feel. Also, because it's going to be Warhammer, I added a few skulls from GW as well, embedding them into the dirt, just giving it a little bit more character and giving it that little bit more 40k-ness. So if you're going to try and do this Gorilla Glue approach as well, just keep an eye on how much glue you're using and the expansion of it. Overall I think it worked quite well. I think I'll just use a little less glue next time. So the next day when it was fully dry, I found that my modular pieces that are going in between the main sections now float above the floor, leaving a gap between the ground and the barricade. I thought about then adding the modular pieces to bases as well, but then I would have to have them side by side, and how I cut them, you wouldn't be able to interlock them and it wouldn't look like a proper sturdy barricade. In my mind it would look awful. So I decided to suck it up and just use my imagination when I'm playing a game and using these pieces. Imagination. What I would do differently if I was ever to recreate these is with the modular pieces in between the main wall segments with the bases. I wouldn't cut the modular pieces down until the wall segments were done. Then I would see how much I would need to cut off on each modular piece so you didn't have that gap underneath. You live and learn. So the next part was to fill in the concrete sections so they looked more like concrete barricades. Nice and easy. I took some foam, cut it down to size, dry fitted it to see how it would fit, and then super glued them in place. This worked really well. I was really happy with it. They were still lightweight, but it gave a little bit more bulk to the actual look. So looking at these card containers, I noticed that they have a kind of a patterned texture which I didn't think would translate to concrete very well. If these barricades were some sort of super sci-fi kind of carbon composite, then it would look great, but as it's 40k, it needs to look gritty and solid. Black sci-fi barricades in the Warhammer 40k universe? No. So I decided to do the same as my last terrain video. Link down below and in the cards for that video, guys. It's another trash to terrain video where I build some power generators out of some cardboard packing material. Now that the shameless self-promotion's out of the way, I took that same plaster, mixed it up and started putting it on thinly across the barricades just to cover up that pattern texture. Once that was dry, I sanded down all the rough edges. As I said, I'm using plaster for this, but you can use spackle or filler, exactly the same stuff. Slop on, sand it down till you're happy with the look of it. I wasn't going too thick with it. I could have done another layer of it once it had dried and sanded, but I was happy with what it looked like. In places it got a little bit fairy where I'd gone through to the cardboard and sanded the card a bit. I wasn't too worried about that. It was at this point I realised I should have beveled the edges to the bases before gluing anything on. Rookie mistake. So I tried to bevel the edges best I could now, which didn't particularly look great. It looked a bit meh, but you live and you learn. Now with the plaster I used being quite absorbent, I didn't want the paint just to be sucked all the way in there and lose its opacity. So I decided to varnish it. Once the varnishing was all done, it's step 3, which is painting. So with the painting I decided just to go for a nice easy grey concrete and brown earth. First things first, I primed it all black. I could have used my airbrush for this, but I had some old rattle cans, so I decided to use them up. Remember, if you're using any kind of spray cans or anything like that, make sure you're working in a well ventilated area. I recommend outside, and make sure you're wearing some sort of mask and PPE because it can be harmful. You've been warned. Next, I just base coated the grey for the concrete and the brown for the earth. With the grey, I wanted it darker at the bottom and lighter at the top, simulating some sort of zenithal highlight. So I went and layered up some lighter greys in the base coating process. Once they were all dry, I used a brown wash for the earth, but with the concrete I wanted a little bit more variety in tones. So I used a black, a blue and a brown wash, splodged those around on the barricades, and in different areas blended them in a bit with just some water on a brush, just giving them a little bit more of a mottled effect on the concrete. I really didn't like how dark the concrete looked. It still looked really flat and just dull grey, and it looked really dark. There was no character in it whatsoever. So at this point I wanted to make up a little bit of time, so I bashed out out the airbrush, sprayed it grey. Once that was dry, I re-washed it with the 3 washes again. I think next time what I'll do is just base coat in a light grey and then use the washes to make certain areas darker. This worked a lot better, had a lot more tonal variety in the concrete, and it didn't look so flat and grey. Once those washes were dry, I dry brushed it with a light grey again and then added a brown wash on top of that just to give it a little bit more of a weathered look. With the brown wash on the concrete, I didn't want some of the areas to dry fully. I wanted like a streaky look. I dabbed it off deliberately, creating a coffee stain effect, just so it looked a little bit more streaky and weathered in areas. And finally, I added some grass tufts around the base and some earthy pigments just to bring it to life. And there you have it, one modular barricade defense line made entirely from takeaway containers. Overall, I am really happy with how these containers came out. There was a couple of places down the line where I didn't think it would work, but I pushed through and I'm really proud of these little things. Sometimes it's the simplest projects that can give you the most joy, and these are definitely one of these cases for me. But what do you think of them? Let me know in the comments below. Would you have done the same? Would you do things differently? I know there's one thing that I would have probably added in the building stage is some bullet holes and some more actual battle damage. Just give it a little bit more life. But all over, I'm really happy with how these came out and cannot wait to get them on the table. But let me know what you think in the comments, guys. If you like what I'm doing here at Aquila Painting and want to support the channel, the best way to do it is on my Patreon. There you can support the channel for as little as £2 a month. If you want to be a part of what I'm doing here and what's on the channel, you can through the second tier, where you get access to Patreon shoutouts on the channel, whip updates, you can request video ideas and minis you want me to paint. With both tiers, you get access to the Burnt Aquila private Discord server, where you guys can chat to each other, chat to me, ask any questions, share information about the hobby, share ideas and just chat hobby. So if you want to support me and the channel, go check out my Patreon in the link down below. But that's all from me at Aquila Painting for another video. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves and thank you for sticking all the way to the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content at Aquila Painting. Smash that bell icon so you don't miss a thing and leave a comment with your thoughts on this video, guys. Until next time, peace!